The border did not look like a border. There were no walls, no minefields, no warning beacons flashing red. Just a thin, almost ceremonial line of old navigation markers drifting in empty space. Ancient, faded, and ignored by modern star charts. That alone should have been a warning. The Coalition fleet crossed it anyway. Admiral Kethrick stood on the command deck of the flagship Vast Dominion, watching the holographic map rotate slowly in the air. Hundreds of warships followed behind him in perfect formation. Cruisers, carriers, troop barges, and escorts. A force large enough to crush entire systems. "This is the so-called human exclusion zone," one of the captains asked, his tone amused. "There is nothing here." Kethrick's mandibles clicked in agreement. Old myths. Old fear. Humans vanished centuries ago. The records said humans had retreated after a long, costly war. They said humanity fractured, withdrew, and sealed off a useless stretch of space. Over time, the warnings remained, but no one could explain why. No patrols. No responses. No activity. Empty space. "Advance," Kethrick's ordered. The fleet moved deeper. At first, nothing happened. Then the first anomaly appeared. Navigation Officer Ralton frowned at his console. "Admiral, minor drift detected. Our forward scouts are off course by 0.03 degrees. "Correct it," Kethrick said. Ralton paused. "We already did. Twice." The stars ahead looked normal. Too normal. The silence between systems felt heavy, thick, like something holding its breath. Moments later, a scout ship at the edge of the formation vanished. No explosion. No energy spike. No distress call. It was simply gone. The bridge fell quiet. "Status," Kethrick's demanded. Sensors swept the area. Empty. Clean. No debris. "Perhaps a drive failure," one officer offered weakly. Before Kethrick's could respond, a second ship disappeared, closer this time. Then a third. Fear crept into the bridge like a cold fog. "Pull the fleet into defensive spacing," Kethrick's ordered. As the ships adjusted, long-range scanners flickered. Ghost readings appeared. Shapes too large, too fast, then gone again. "Admiral," Ralton whispered, "these signatures don't match any known species." Kethrick's felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. "This space was declared inactive," he said slowly. "That does not mean undefended." Another ship vanished. This time, the crew watched it happen. 1 second it was there. The next, empty darkness where it had been. No sound. No warning. Panic spread through the fleet channels. Then every screen on the bridge went black. For half a second, the universe disappeared. When the displays returned, a single line of text hovered in the center of every screen, written in a language older than the Coalition itself. "You crossed the line." The words pulsed once, then vanished. Communications erupted. "Admiral, all channels are jammed. Hyperspace routes are collapsing. We are being boxed in." Kethrick stared at the empty space ahead. "Humans," he said quietly. "They are still here." As if summoned by the word, space itself seemed to bend. Something massive moved beyond sensor range. Not cloaked, not hidden, but deliberately unseen. Like a shadow choosing when to be noticed. A calm, human voice broke through the chaos, transmitted directly into the flagship's command systems. "Coalition fleet," the voice said. "This is Human Defensive Command." There was no anger in the voice. No triumph. Only certainty. "You have entered restricted space. This zone was marked. This zone was warned. You chose to ignore it." Kethrick tried to respond, but the channel would not open. The voice continued. "We do not fire first. We never have." Another ship went dark, disabled, not destroyed. Its power bled away like a dying star. "But we always fire last." For the first time in his long career, Admiral Kethrick understood the truth. Human space was not empty. It was patient. The lights on the bridge dimmed as something enormous shifted just beyond visual range. Multiple presences now, surrounding them, watching. The human voice spoke one final sentence before the transmission cut. "You are already too deep." Outside the viewport, the stars began to move in ways stars should not. And the Coalition fleet realized, with growing terror, that humanity had already struck, and this was only the beginning. The first mistake the Coalition made after realizing humans were still present was trying to regain control. Admiral Kethrick ordered emergency countermeasures across the fleet. Power was rerouted to shields. Weapon systems were brought online. Long-range sensors were pushed beyond safe limits, burning through reserves to see something, anything, that could be fought. The fleet needed an enemy shape. It did not get one. Instead, space itself began to behave incorrectly. Distances stretched and folded. Star positions drifted slightly between scans, never enough to trigger alarms, but enough to ruin targeting solutions. Missiles locked on empty coordinates. Beam weapons fired and vanished into darkness, never reaching a target. The humans were not jamming the fleet. They were denying it reality. Admiral, Navigation Officer Ralten said, struggling to keep his voice steady. Our internal clocks are desynchronizing. Different ships are reporting different elapsed times since entry. Kethrix turned slowly. Explain. Ralten swallowed. Some ships believe we crossed the border 12 minutes ago. Others believe it was nearly an hour. That should not have been possible. Before Kethrix could issue a response, a carrier on the right flank lost gravity. Its crew slammed into bulkheads as the ship twisted violently, then froze in place, suspended, powerless, alive. Then the carrier vanished. This time, sensors recorded it. A precise collapse of space, like a door closing. Not destruction, removal. The fleet's formation began to break as fear took hold. Some captains tried to flee. Others held positions. A few fired blindly into the dark. Every independent action made things worse. Human strikes increased, not in speed, but in pattern. Each attack followed a mistake. Each loss felt corrective. They are watching us, Kethrix said aloud. No one disagreed. Deep within the fleet, a heavy cruiser attempted an emergency hyperspace jump. The drive ignited and failed. Space around the cruiser hardened like glass. The ship tore itself apart trying to escape, shredding its own hull as physics refused to open. The message was clear. There would be no retreat. A sudden burst of internal alarms echoed across the flagship. Not from sensors, from systems. Human code was inside their networks. Admiral, a systems officer said, panic breaking through training. They are accessing our tactical archives. Our fleet doctrine. Our command hierarchies. Kethrix clenched his claws. Cut all data links. We can't, the officer replied. They're not using our links. They're already there. The human voice returned, calm as before. Your species favors overwhelming force, it said. Large formations. Centralized command. Predictable escalation. Holographic displays lit up without permission, showing real-time projections of coalition maneuvers before they happened. You have always believed size wins wars. A destroyer at the fleet's core lost power. Then another. Then 10 more. Not destroyed. Paralyzed. But humans learned something different. For the first time, human vessels appeared. Not fully. Just outlines. Faint distortions in space, enormous in scale. Larger than coalition dreadnoughts. Positioned everywhere at once. They had been there the entire time. Kethrix felt the weight of it crush him. This space, he whispered. It was never abandoned. No, the human voice replied. It was prepared. Across the fleet, panic turned into terror. Crews realized the truth too late. They had not been ambushed. They had walked into a completed equation. Human strikes continued, but never randomly. Supply ships were cut off first. Communication relays next. Flagships isolated, one by one. The fleet was being disassembled while still alive. A junior officer on the bridge spoke without thinking. Why don't they just destroy us? The human voice answered him directly. Because destruction teaches nothing. Kethrix straightened, forcing his fear down. Human command, he said, finally forcing an open transmission through sheer authority. This conflict can still be resolved. There was a pause. No hesitation. Consideration. We agree, the human replied. That is why you are still breathing. The stars shifted again. The outlines of human ships became clearer now. Angular, scarred, heavy with history. Weapons remained cold, but power readings dwarfed anything the coalition had ever built. Kethrix realized something else then. Humanity had not rushed to war. They had waited centuries for someone to make this mistake. All coalition vessels, Kethrix ordered quietly, cease independent action. Hold position. Some obeyed. Others did not. One cruiser fired. The response was instant. A single human ship flickered fully into view for less than a second. One precise pulse of energy struck the cruiser's core. The ship vanished. No debris. No survivors. The human voice spoke again, colder now. That was the last warning. Silence spread through the fleet. Kethrix felt the weight of his choices settle on him. His people had believed humans were weak because they were quiet. Now he understood the truth. Silence was not absent. It was restraint. As the human ships closed in, slowly, deliberately, the coalition fleet understood what it meant to trespass human space. And far beyond the battlefield, the galaxy had not yet begun to notice what was unfolding. But it would. Soon. The human command chamber did not look like a war room. There were no raised voices, no frantic movement, no flashing alarms. It was quiet. A wide circular space, buried deep inside a structure hidden between folded layers of space. Walls of dark alloy reflected soft light. Holograms floated calmly in the air, showing the coalition fleet from every angle. Each ship tagged, tracked, and predicted seconds before it moved. At the center stood Commander Elias Ward, hands clasped behind his back, eyes steady. "They're finally holding position," one of the analysts said. Ward nodded. Fear slows them down. Confusion breaks them. Around him, officers from different branches of Human Defensive Command watched the projections with controlled focus. None of them looked surprised. Everything happening had been expected. "They crossed Marker 7, another officer said. "Same mistake every time." Ward allowed himself a small breath. "Because they never believe the warnings are real." The markers were ancient by design, old enough to look ceremonial, old enough to invite arrogance. Humanity had learned long ago that a strong wall made enemies test it. A thin line made them cross it. "Status on Phase 1? Ward asked. "Complete," the analyst replied. "Fleet cohesion reduced by 60%. Command hierarchy fractured. No viable escape routes." Ward turned his gaze to a section of the hologram where several coalition ships drifted powerless. "Any casualties?" "Minimal," the officer said. As ordered. Ward was silent for a moment. He remembered the old recordings. The first human expansion. The early treaties. The first betrayal. How humanity had trusted the galaxy and paid for it in blood. They had not forgotten. They had adapted. "Begin Phase 2 visibility," Ward said. Back in the dark of trespassed space, the coalition fleet felt the change immediately. The shadows sharpened. Human ships emerged fully now, not rushing, not dramatic, but inevitable. Massive hulls slid into view from impossible angles. Some unfolded from dimensions the coalition could not measure. Others simply appeared where sensors insisted nothing could exist. Each ship bore scars. Not damage, history. Admiral Kethrix stared through the viewport, his mandibles trembling. They were not beautiful. They were experienced. "They're not surrounding us," Ralten whispered. "They already have." Human vessels held position just outside firing range. Close enough to be undeniable. Far enough to feel untouchable. The human voice returned, no longer speaking as a warning, but as a lesson. "You are seeing our outer layer," it said. "These ships are not our strongest. They are our oldest." The word struck harder than any weapon. Old means tested. Old means survived. Old means used. Kethrix forced himself to speak. "Why reveal yourselves now?" A human figure appeared on the flagship's main screen. Not armored. Not imposing. Just calm. Eyes steady. "Because now you are ready to listen," the human said. "Before, you were not." Around the fleet, disabled ships were gently moved, guided into stable formations by unseen forces. Crews watched in shock as human control over gravity itself corrected their trajectories. "They could have killed us," one officer whispered. "Yes," Kethrix replied. "And they chose not to." That realization terrified him more than annihilation. The human continued. Human space was never abandoned. It was closed. Images filled the screens, historical records pulled from human archives. Cities burned. Fleets shattered. Treaties broken. Species that no longer existed. "We learned that borders only matter when enforced," the human said. "So we stopped expanding. We stopped speaking. We started preparing." The coalition bridge fell silent as the footage played. "We did not forget the galaxy," the human went on. "We watched it." Kethrix felt shame coil in his core. "How long?" he asked. The human did not answer immediately. "Long enough," they said at last. In human command, Ward watched Kethrix's posture change. Fear had matured into understanding. "He's ready," one of the officers said. Ward nodded. "Proceed." A new projection appeared across every coalition ship. Maps of space, rewritten. Human space marked clearly now, not as empty zones, but as layered regions of defense. Each layer has a different trap. Each trap is designed to test a different kind of invader. You crossed the first layer, the human voice said. Most never do. Kethrix exhaled slowly. And the second? The human's eyes hardened slightly. You are in it. Outside, human ships shifted formation, not aggressively, but decisively. Power readings spiked, then stabilized at levels that defied known limits. Phase 2 complete, an analyst reported to Ward. They understand now. Ward watched the fleet carefully. Understanding does not equal acceptance. As if summoned by the words, a coalition captain broke formation. His ship powered weapons and turned toward a human cruiser. No, Kethrix shouted. Stand down. The order came too late. The human response was instant and surgical. A single beam of compressed energy lanced out, striking the rebel ship's engines. Not the weapons. Not the core. The ship went dark. The human voice returned, colder now. That was mercy, it said. Do not confuse it for weakness. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. Kethrix lowered his head. What do you want? The human looked at him for a long moment. Nothing you do not already owe, they said. Recognition, respect, and memory. In the command chamber, Ward allowed himself a quiet nod. They'll take the message back, one officer said. Yes, Ward replied. And if they don't, someone else will. The human figure on the screen delivered the final words to the fleet. You will leave this space alive. You will tell the galaxy what happened here. A pause. And if anyone crosses this line again. The human ships began to withdraw, fading not away, but deeper, into layers of space that no sensor could follow. We will not need to speak twice. The stars slowly returned to their proper positions. Hyperspace routes reopened, carefully, deliberately. The coalition fleet remained still, shaken, humbled, and alive. Far away, beyond the battlefield, faint signals began to leak. Rumors. Data fragments. Fear. The galaxy was about to learn a truth it had ignored for centuries. Humanity had not disappeared. It had been waiting. The moment the hyperspace corridors reopened, every surviving coalition captain felt the same instinct. Run. Escape vectors flooded command channels. Engines spooled. Drives warmed. A fleet that had once advanced with arrogance now trembled like prey, sensing an opening in the cage. Admiral Kethrix knew better. Hold position, he ordered, his voice sharp. No sudden movement. Some captains obeyed. Others did not. A cluster of frigates on the outer edge of the formation ignited their drives, tearing toward the newly opened corridors. Their commanders believed speed could save them. They believed distance still mattered. Human space corrected that belief. The corridors collapsed behind the fleeing ships, not violently, not dramatically, but cleanly, like doors closing at the exact wrong moment. The frigates slammed into hardened spacetime. Hulls folded. Drives overloaded. 3 ships were erased. Not destroyed. Erased. The rest of the fleet froze. The human voice returned, not angry, not loud, but final. Movement without permission is interpreted as hostile intent. No one moved again. Inside Human Defensive Command, Commander Ward watched the updated projections. His officers remained calm, but the air had changed. Phase 3 had always been the most dangerous. Coalition morale is breaking, an analyst reported. Fear thresholds exceeded 40% of vessels. Ward nodded. That's expected. And the rest? They're adapting, the analyst said carefully. Learning restraint. Ward allowed himself a thin smile. Good. That means they'll survive. He gestured to the hologram. Begin Phase 3. Limited engagement. The order rippled outward, silent and absolute. Back in trespass space, the coalition fleet felt it immediately. Human ships moved. Not as a wave. Not as a charge. They separated. Individual human vessels peeled away from the formation, drifting toward specific coalition targets. Each movement was deliberate. Each target chosen with care. Kethrix watched in horror and awe as the pattern became clear. They're not attacking randomly, Ralten said, voice tight. They're targeting command ships, logistics hubs, sensor platforms. They're removing our ability to fight, Kethrix replied. Not our lives. A human cruiser approached a coalition command vessel twice its size. The coalition ship fired everything it had, beams, missiles, kinetic rounds. Nothing landed. Space bent around the human hull, folding incoming fire away like water around stone. The human ship responded with a single pulse. The coalition vessel went dark. Crew alive. Systems dead. It drifted. Across the battlefield, similar scenes unfolded. Human strikes were short, precise, and devastating. No wasted motion. No spectacle. The galaxy's most powerful coalition fleet was being dismantled piece by piece. On one carrier, a young coalition officer stared at the damage reports in disbelief. "They could destroy us in seconds," he whispered. "Why won't they?" His commander answered quietly. "Because this is not punishment." Another human transmission cut in, heard across every bridge. "This is education." The words settled heavily. Human ships moved closer now, close enough for visual detail. Coalition crews saw hull markings, symbols, names, scars burned into metal. Some ships bore markings of battles older than most species' recorded history. These ships had fought before and survived. Kethrix opened a secure channel. "Human command," he said. "What happens next?" There was a pause. Then the human figure appeared again, calm as ever. "Next," the human said, "we test something." "What?" Kethrix asked. "Your restraint." As if on cue, one of the coalition's remaining heavy dreadnoughts suffered a systems failure. Weapons offline. Shields gone. It drifted helplessly between human vessels. Every human weapon stayed cold. The dreadnought's captain panicked. "Admiral, we are exposed. Permission to fire manually." Kethrix hesitated. Every instinct screamed to strike, to lash out before the jaws closed. But he remembered the erased ships. The warnings. "Patience." "Negative," Kethrix said firmly. "Hold fire." Seconds stretched. Nothing happened. The dreadnought remained intact. The human voice returned, softer now. "You chose correctly." Relief rippled through the fleet. Ward watched the exchange from human command. "They're learning," he said. "Yes," another officer replied. "But learning under fear." Ward's jaw tightened slightly. "Fear fades. Memory doesn't. That's what matters." Phase 3 continued. Human forces disabled the coalition's final long-range sensors. Communication relays were isolated. Command authority fragmented. The fleet still existed, but it no longer functioned as a weapon. Kethrix felt the weight of it settle fully. They had lost. Not on fire. In control. "Admiral," Ralten said quietly. "Incoming external signals." "From where?" Kethrix asked. "Outside this region. Other powers. They are watching." The galaxy was beginning to notice. Human command detected it too. Information leakage confirmed, an analyst said. External observers picking up battle signatures. Ward nodded slowly. "Good. Good," the officer asked. "Yes," Ward replied. "We don't want secrets anymore." On coalition bridges, crews whispered as fragments of data slipped past human containment. Short clips. Sensor anomalies. Human ship outlines. The words "you crossed the line" repeated endlessly across darknet channels. Fear spreads faster than fleets. Kethrix addressed his remaining captains. "We will survive this," he said. "But only if we stop thinking like conquerors." Some captains lowered their heads in agreement. Others stared at the human ships, unable to look away. A final act of defiance came without warning. A coalition weapons platform, autonomous, pre-programmed, activated from deep within the formation. Old code. Old orders. It fired a full barrage toward human lines. Ward's eyes hardened. Neutralize. One human ship moved. Just one. It did not fire a beam. It changed gravity. The weapons platform folded inward, crushed by its own mass, collapsing into a silent singularity that evaporated seconds later. No debris. No shockwave. Nothing left. The human voice spoke one final time during Phase 3. That was not a warning. That was a correction. Silence followed. The coalition fleet did not move, did not fire, did not breathe. Phase 3 ended. Inside human command, Ward exhaled slowly. "Prepare Phase 4. An officer looked up sharply. "You're going to let them go?" "Yes," Ward said. "Broken fleets make loud warnings." He looked at the hologram of the battered armada, still alive, still watching. "They will carry our message further than any missile ever could." Outside, human ships began to withdraw again, not fully leaving, but pulling back just enough to signal the end of violence. The coalition fleet remained frozen, surrounded by the echoes of their own failure. And far beyond, across listening posts and hidden arrays, The galaxy leaned closer to its screens. What had crossed into human space as an act of arrogance was now something else entirely. A lesson in progress. And the lesson was not over yet. The silence after Phase 3 felt heavier than the fighting. Coalition ships drifted in broken formations, engines idling, weapons dark. No one spoke unless necessary. Every captain knew a single mistake could end everything that remained. Admiral Kethrix stood on the command deck of the vast Dominion, staring at the tactical display. Where once there had been clean lines and unified vectors, there was now only a scattered constellation of crippled icons. They were alive. That fact alone felt unreal. Admiral, Ralton said softly, human command is opening a channel. Priority access. Kethrix straightened. On screen, the human figure appeared again. Same calm expression. Same steady eyes. But something was different now. The tone was no longer instructional. It was judicial. Admiral Kethrix, the human said. You will answer questions. Kethrix inclined his head. We will. Good, the human replied. Because what happens next will determine whether this incident ends here, or becomes a chapter in a much larger story. Across the Coalition fleet, similar channels opened. Human command was not speaking to one ship. It was speaking to all of them. You crossed a marked border, the human voice continued. You did so with military force. You ignored archived warnings, historical treaties, and recorded casualties. Images appeared on Coalition screens. Old records pulled from sealed databases. First contact logs. Peace accords. Broken agreements. Human worlds burned long ago. Many Coalition officers had never seen these files before. These records were classified. One captain protested. They were buried, the human replied evenly, by those who benefited from forgetting. Kethrix felt something shift inside him. Shame, anger, realization. You believed humanity withdrew because it was weak, the human said. You believed silence meant surrender. The image changed. Human fleets retreated centuries ago. Borders closing. Gates shutting. We withdrew because expansion made us careless, the human continued. Because trust made us vulnerable. Because the galaxy taught us a lesson we chose not to forget. Kethrix swallowed. Then why let us live? The human paused. Because annihilation is easy, they said. And easy answers repeat mistakes. In Human Defensive Command, Commander Ward watched the exchange carefully. Phase 4 had never been about weapons. It was about consequence. Begin accountability sequence, Ward said quietly. Across Coalition space, something unprecedented happened. Human systems released control. Not completely, but enough. Coalition commanders suddenly had access to long-range sensors again. External communications flickered back online. Not all channels. Just enough to speak. To report. To explain. To the Coalition fleet, the human voice said, now broadcast wide. You will transmit a full account of this event to your governments. Unedited. Unfiltered. Several captains hesitated. You will include your errors, the human added. Your assumptions. Your losses. The implication was clear. This was not about blame. It was about memory. And if we refuse, a distant captain asked. The human expression did not change. Then this fleet will never leave this space. No threat followed. None was needed. Kethrix activated his fleet-wide channel. We will comply. Around him, officers nodded. Some in relief. Some are in dread. Data transmissions began. Raw sensor logs, battle recordings, audio from bridges filled with panic. The truth spilled outward, unstoppable. On distant worlds, alarms sounded as reports flooded in. Governments paused. Councils froze. Analysts stared at impossible footage. Human ships. Human weapons. Human restraint. Back in trespassed space, a new phase began. Human vessels moved again, not to attack, but to escort. Disabled Coalition ships were stabilized. Power restored enough for life support. Gravitational anomalies corrected. The humans were repairing the damage they had caused. Not fully, just enough to send them home. Why help us now? Ralton asked quietly. Kethrix answered without hesitation. Because mercy is part of the message. The human voice returned one final time, now directed solely at Kethrix. You will return to your space, the human said. You will not be pursued. You will not be punished further. A pause. But understand this. What you experienced was the minimum response. Kethrix met the human's gaze. And if another fleet crosses the line? The humans' eyes hardened, not with anger, but certainty. Then they will not receive instruction, they said. They will receive closure. The channel closed. Human ships began to withdraw in full now, slipping back into layers of space the coalition could not follow. One by one, they vanished, not fleeing, but returning to places that had always been theirs. As the last human presence faded, hyperspace corridors stabilized completely. The way out was open, but no one rushed. The coalition fleet remained still for several long moments. Then Ketherick spoke. "All vessels," he said, voice steady, heavy with truth. "We leave this space together." Slowly, carefully, the fleet turned as one, not in triumph, not in formation, but in survival. As the first ships entered hyperspace, signals continued to spread across the galaxy. Emergency councils convened. Old maps were reopened. Borders were redrawn. Human space, once labeled inactive, was now marked with a single phrase across every updated chart. Restricted. Absolute. On worlds that had mocked humanity's silence, fear replaced arrogance. On others, something else appeared. Respect. In Human Defensive Command, Commander Ward watched the last coalition ship vanish. Phase 4 complete. "Do you think they learned?" an officer asked. Ward considered the question. "They learned enough," he said. "The rest will be learned by those who hear the story." He turned away from the hologram, already thinking ahead. Humanity had revealed itself again, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as a boundary. And boundaries, once remembered, changed everything. Far across the stars, as the coalition fleet limped home carrying truth instead of glory, a new understanding began to spread. Human space was not empty. Human patience was not a weakness. And some lines, once crossed, rewrote the galaxy forever. The coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace in fragments. Not broken, shaken. Ships arrived at staggered intervals, drives scarred, systems limping, crews silent. Gone was the confident armada that had crossed into human space. What returned was a witness. Admiral Ketherick stood before the Grand Coalition Council hours later, his image projected into a vast chamber of stone and light. Representatives from dozens of species watched him closely. Some leaned forward. Others leaned back, already afraid of what they were about to hear. "You are late," one counselor said sharply. Ketherick did not bow. He did not apologize. "You are alive," he replied. "That is the difference." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Explain," another demanded. "Our sensors detected extreme spatial anomalies. We lost contact with your fleet." Ketherick inhaled slowly. "Because we trespassed." The chamber stilled. "We crossed into human space." Several counselors scoffed. One laughed outright. "Human space? That region is inactive." Ketherick's voice hardened. "No, it is closed." He began the transmission. Raw footage flooded the chamber. Ships vanishing without fire, stars bending, outlines of human vessels emerging from nothing. The words "you crossed the line" echoed through the hall. For the first time in centuries, the Coalition Council fell completely silent. They were waiting. Ketherick continued. Not with anger, with certainty. The footage shifted to human command. Calm voices, controlled strikes, mercy offered and withdrawn with precision. Not conquest. Correction. "They dismantled us without rage," Ketherick said. "They taught us while we were afraid." A counselor rose slowly. "If they possess this power, why reveal it now?" Ketherick met their gaze. Because someone finally gave them a reason. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Emergency assemblies. Frozen legislatures. Military commands replaying the same data over and over, searching for flaws that did not exist. Human ships moved through space like laws of nature, not weapons. And then the second wave of fear arrived. The archives, human data packages, released deliberately, began spreading across secured networks. Old treaties surfaced, some broken, some erased. Records of early human colonies burned during misunderstandings. Border disputes resolved with human blood. History, long edited, was returning. In one word, a young analyst whispered, "They didn't forget." On another, an elder said quietly, "They forgave." Until they didn't need to anymore. Back in human space, the stars were calm again. Human Defensive Command powered down active layers. Traps reset. Space returned to normal, not because it was safe, but because it was ready. Commander Ward stood alone now, watching a simplified map of the galaxy. Human borders glowed faintly, not aggressive, not hidden. Present. They'll test us again, an officer said behind him. Yes, Ward replied. Eventually. And when will they do it? Ward did not turn. They'll find the line clearer next time. Deep within the human network, long-dormant protocols shifted status. Not too active. To be acknowledged. Humanity had re-entered the galaxy's awareness. Not as an empire. As a constant. Weeks passed. No fleets crossed the line. Trade routes quietly adjusted. Military exercises were canceled or relocated. Exploratory missions were rerouted with excessive caution. A new phrase entered the galactic language. Don't human it. It meant, don't test what is patient. On a fringe world, far from councils and capitals, a small alien freighter drifted near the edge of human-marked space. Its captain stared at the updated star map, fingers hovering over the controls. Why did they mark it now? His navigator asked. The captain answered softly. Because someone needed reminding. They turned away. Elsewhere, an old species, one that remembered the early days, watched the silence with something close to relief. They're back, one elder said. Yes, another replied. And they're still choosing restraint. That restraint echoed louder than war. In coalition space, Admiral Kethrix resigned his command. Not in disgrace. In warning. His final address was brief. We survived because they allowed it, he said. Do not mistake survival for victory. The message spread. And somewhere in the deep layers of human space, long-range sensors detected faint, distant movements. Other powers watching, measuring, wondering. Commander Ward reviewed the data calmly. Let them watch, he said. We're done hiding. The stars beyond human borders remained quiet. But now, every species knows why. Because human space was no longer a rumor. It was a memory reinforced. And the galaxy, at last, remembered to be careful. The first violation after the warning did not come from the coalition. It came from those who believed the coalition had been spared because the humans were bluffing. Far beyond the now-marked borders of human space, in regions where pride still outweighed fear, a smaller power watched the recordings with disbelief. Their leaders replayed the same clips the rest of the galaxy had seen. Ships erased, fleets dismantled, mercy given. And they laughed. These humans allowed the coalition to leave, their war council argued. That is weakness. Power that hesitates invites challenge. They convinced themselves the humans had revealed their strength too early, that the display had been exaggerated, that no force could truly control space itself. And so they chose to test the line again. Quietly, deliberately. A strike group of advanced warships, smaller than the coalition fleet but faster, more aggressive, slipped toward human space under deep cloak. No announcement. No grand invasion. Just a probe meant to prove the humans could be bled. Human sensors detected them before they crossed the first marker. Commander Ward watched their approach in silence. They think subtlety will save them, one officer observed. Ward nodded once. That means they didn't understand the lesson. Orders? Another asked. Ward did not answer immediately. His eyes remained on the incoming vector. Record everything, he said finally. Then ended. The moment the strike group crossed the line, the difference was immediate. There was no warning message. No spoken words. No instructional tone. Human space responded instantly. The region around the intruding ships hardened, not violently, not with force, but with inevitability. Cloaks failed. Drives stuttered. Weapons systems locked in safety loops they could not override. The intruders tried to retreat. Space refused. Their commander barked orders, panic bleeding through discipline. Fire everything. Break through. They fired. For the first time since humanity revealed itself, a human response came without restraint. The stars dimmed. Not from the shadows. From absence. Human vessels emerged, not the older ships shown to the coalition, but something else entirely. Sleeker. Denser. Built not to teach, but to finish. Ward watched without expression. This is not a battle, he said quietly. This is enforcement. Human weapons activated. There were no beams. No explosions. The intruding ships simply stopped existing. Not erased one by one. All at once. A precise collapse of space-time folded the entire strike group inward, compressing matter, energy, and information into nothing that could be measured. No wreckage remained. No signal escaped. The line held. Within seconds, the event was over. Human space returned to stillness as if nothing had happened. But outside, across listening posts and long-range arrays, the effect was immediate. Every sensor that had been watching went blind for a fraction of a second. Every analyst froze. And every government understood the difference. The coalition had been taught. These intruders had ended. Words spread faster than fear. The phrase changed. It was no longer "don't human it." It became something simpler. Don't cross. In the aftermath, Human Defensive Command released a single statement to the galaxy. Not a threat. Not a declaration of war. Just a clarification. Unauthorized military entry into restricted human space has consequences. No further explanations will be provided. That was all. No footage followed. No recordings. The absence spoke louder than any display. In coalition space, Admiral Kethrix watched the reports in silence from his private quarters. He did not smile. He did not flinch. They warned us, he murmured. We listened. Others didn't. On distant worlds, border disputes quietly resolved themselves. Fleets repositioned. War doctrines were rewritten overnight. Human space was no longer a mystery to be explored. It was a fact to be respected. Back within the layered depths of human territory, Commander Ward stood once more before the galaxy map. The border glowed steady and calm. Do you think that was enough? An officer asked. Ward considered the question. For now, he said. He turned away from the display. Humanity does not need to conquer the galaxy, Ward continued. We only need it to remember us. Outside, patrol ships resumed their quiet watch. Not aggressive. Not hidden. Present. The line remained. And this time, no one laughed at it. The galaxy adjusted. Not loudly. Not all at once. But everywhere. Trade lanes shifted first. Routes that once brushed close to human-marked space now curved wide, adding weeks of travel without complaint. Shipping guilds updated charts overnight. Navigators treated the human border like a gravitational hazard, something you respected even if you never saw it. Then the military changed. Exercises were canceled near the line. War games rewrote their scenarios. Simulations that once assumed human space was neutral or empty now treated it as a fixed, immovable constant, an absolute no-go zone. And slowly, quietly, the idea settled in. Humanity was no longer a variable. In the Grand Coalition Council, the chamber filled again, but the tone was different this time. No shouting. No denial. The massive star map at the center displayed the galaxy as it now existed. Human space glowed faintly. Untouched. A counselor broke the silence. We must redefine our borders. Another nodded. And our assumptions. A third spoke words that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. We should consider consultation. The room froze. Consultation? Someone repeated. With the humans, the counselor said carefully. Not negotiation. Not an alliance. But acknowledgement. No one laughed. The idea lingered. Across the galaxy, historians began reopening sealed archives. Entire sections of recorded history were revised. Humanity's disappearance was reclassified, not as collapse, but as strategic withdrawal. Old conflicts were re-examined under a harsher light. On some worlds, monuments were quietly dismantled. On others, apologies were drafted and never sent. Back within human space, life continued. Cities thrived under artificial suns. Shipyards worked in silence, building vessels no outsider would ever see unless invited. Generations that had never known galactic politics watched the news with distant interest. They're scared of us now, a young civilian remarked. An older one shook their head. No, they're careful. There's a difference. At Human Defensive Command, Commander Ward reviewed long-term projections. The threat probability had dropped sharply. Incursion likelihood was near zero. Peace, for now. An officer entered quietly. Sir, long-range sensors confirm no hostile movement within 10,000 light-years of the border. Ward nodded. Expected. And the observers? They're still watching. Quietly. Ward allowed himself a small breath. Good. Watching is better than testing. He dismissed the officer and turned back to the galaxy map. Humanity's borders did not expand. They did not retract. They simply were. A message arrived through secured channels, encrypted, hesitant, filtered through layers of protocol. A request. From a neutral civilization. Ancient. Careful. One that remembered humanity from before the silence. Ward read it slowly. They were asking permission to speak. Not to enter. Not to bargain. just to talk. Ward considered it longer than the request deserved, not because it was dangerous, but because it mattered. Then he approved a response. One word. Accepted. The galaxy noticed that too. On countless worlds, analysts debated what it meant. Some feared it was the beginning of human expansion. Others believed it was a sign of peace. The truth was simpler. Humanity was no longer hiding. But it was not chasing relevance either. It was choosing when to speak. Years passed. The phrase, human space, stopped being spoken with mockery or fear. It became a fixed term, like a law of physics. Children learned it in navigation schools. Commanders drilled it into cadets. Do not approach. Do not probe. Do not cross. And if you must speak, ask. On the edge of human territory, a lone patrol ship drifted between stars. Its crew monitored the silence, sharing quiet conversations, watching the slow turn of the galaxy beyond the line. One officer glanced at the border markers. Hard to believe anyone ever ignored them. The captain replied calmly. They didn't ignore them. Then why cross? The captain smiled faintly. Because every empire thinks rules are for someone else. Right up until they aren't. The patrol continued on. No alarms sounded. No warnings flashed. Human space remained calm, layered, and patient. Elsewhere, in places far from human reach, ambitious powers still dreamed of dominance. But even they spoke in whispers now, glancing at maps before making plans. Because one truth had settled into the collective mind of the galaxy. Humanity did not need to threaten, did not need to conquer. I did not need to remind anyone twice. They had drawn a line. They had shown what happened when it was crossed. And then they had gone quiet again, not because they were gone, but because they were done explaining. In the deepest layers of human space, long-term protocols returned to standby. Traps reset. Observers watched. Builders built. Life went on.